Great, thanks, Katie. Good evening and welcome, everyone. Katie, can we begin with the roll call?
Yes. Mr. Antonio?
Here.
Mr. Badger?
Here.
Mr. Bleefeld? Ms. Chiavacci? Mr. Frank?
Here.
Mrs. Heyman?
Here.
Ms. Karianikas?
Here.
Dr. Morris?
Here.
Mrs. Ginsburg?
Here.
7 present, 2 absent, and Alex Gandaya.
Here.
1 student board rep this evening.
Thanks so much, Katie. All right, please join me now during the Pledge of Allegiance. Good evening again, and welcome everyone to this January 31st meeting of the Wissahickon School Board. Right, looking at our agenda, we first in part 2 list our prior meetings. In section 3, we listed our upcoming meetings. We have another meeting next Monday, February 7th. On February 14th, we have our Racial Equity Oversight Committee meeting. On February 15th, we have a budget workshop. On February 16th, we have a policy committee meeting. On February 23rd, I'll have my MCIU Board of Directors meeting. On February 23rd, we also have a North Modco Joint Operation meeting. And on February 28th, we have another school board meeting. Now we'll go to section 4, which is our presentations for this evening. And our first one is the Board of School Directors recognition.
Thank you. I'll take this one to start us off. And January is each year the month where districts across the state have an opportunity to thank the volunteers who spend so many hours unpaid to help their communities and help the students in their community. So normally we have some volunteers come up here and help us with this in the form of students, as you may recall. We're not doing that at this time. So we have actually a representative of another group affiliated with the district who does all sorts of good things for students and can speak on behalf of many students. So it's a pleasure to introduce and have her please say a few words. The president of our foundation, Allison Matizek.
Thank you so much. I appreciate having the opportunity to come and say thank you for all the work that you do as the school board. Boy, it's been quite the past couple of years, to say the least, and you've done a terrific job, and we really appreciate it. So on behalf of the Wissahickon Educational Opportunities Foundation, we extend our great thanks. I would be remiss if I didn't also thank many of you who have also supported philanthropically WeOff and appreciate all that you do in order to help with the grants that we give for the activities of our community and the 6 schools within the district. I'm joined tonight by our 2 student representatives from WeOff. So I will turn it over to Lauren Kuhlman and Alexandra Bladick. Thank you.
Okay, so first off, we wanted to give a quick recap of our staff tribute event. WeOff raised $4,725, and we were able to send over 180 staff tributes to district staff. The tribute included a personal note from the donor and a small gift. We would like to thank the Wissahickon community for its support of this event and remind everyone that there will be another opportunity to send a staff tribute in late April, early May to celebrate Teacher Appreciation Week.
We are also excited to let you all know about our Double Good Popcorn fundraiser. The Wissahickon community may have already received emails or seen information on the WeOff Facebook page for details, but this week only, WeOff is launching this fundraiser where families are encouraged to create a pop-up shop and purchase popcorn. There are more than 10 flavors to choose from, and in true pop-up fashion, the fundraiser is only available for 4 days, so please don't miss out. Popcorn sales will support grants for Wissahickon teachers.
Okay, and finally, we also wanted to remind everyone that WeOff will be hosting its annual trivia night on May 7th, 2022 at the Center Square Firehouse. More information about ticket prices, COVID precautions, and more just general information will be coming out in the spring closer to the event.
Oh, thank you so much. And in both Lauren and Alexander, we have terrific ambassadors of the district, and your partnership with WeOff is amazing. And I would just like to second what I know will be said many times, which is we value the partnership that WeOff has with the district, and we appreciate you being here tonight, and thank you for all that you do.
Yes, I would second that. Thank you so much for everything that WeOff does, and thank you so much for the gift. This is wonderful. Thank you. And I'm very interested to know more about the popcorn pop-up shop. Some more information is on your website. Awesome. Okay, my family's a big fan of popcorn, so I will be checking that out. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any comments?
Just one quick comment. I'm very excited about having a date for the WeOff Trivia Night. We've always been big supporters and attendees of that event, and glad to see it returning. And thanks to WeOff and everything that you guys do for the district, helping out, providing grants to teacher-driven and school-driven projects and initiatives is really great in helping sort of expand on the opportunities that are available to our kids. So thanks again.
Anyone else have any comments?
I'll just say thank you as well, because I feel like that's not said enough. So thank you so much for what you do.
Really, it's thanks to this community for supporting our students. And we've done a great job, I think, in the past year of gathering more dollars that we can give out for our teacher grants. So we're looking forward to doing that in 2022. So thank you all.
Thank you. Well, if there's no other comments, then we'll turn it back over to Jim again.
Thank you. And we'll take a second to set up our technology for the presentation. I think so. They did. Okay, so tonight we have the 5th annual report of the district's efforts to close the achievement gap. We have shared this report each January now, and the initial launch of this was termed the Achievement Gap 10-Year Attack Plan, and we may change nomenclature, but it's still indicative of a laser focus on doing whatever we can, whatever it's necessary, to ensure that all students achieve. Okay, so we're going to tag team this presentation tonight. I'll take the first part, which is setting the stage, and then I have a team of people who've worked on this and also have much more in-depth things to share. So first of all, what's the same? As I mentioned, we do this every January. This is actually in report number 5 now. This is not what you might recall as a annual district-wide standardized testing report. It's actually not going to even happen this year because of the pandemic. The results of standardized testing are extremely unreliable at best. We'll eventually get back to that point. And that is always in detail included in a separate report, because we don't want to get hung up on achievement being linked to standardized tests. That's one small indicator. What this is also not is a review of individual student growth. Okay, that happens every single day. As a matter of fact, that's happening now in the pandemic as well. And it's just that those are things that skilled professionals in the classroom do on a daily basis as part of their normal responsibilities. This does instead focus on our local achievement gap, and the definition of it is there. And we have from the start been upfront and very frank that our students from certain demographic groups are currently achieving at lower levels than other students. And that's factual. We have plenty of indications of that. And what we need to do is continue to work to close that gap. So there are some ongoing influences. Again, this year due to the pandemic, things are different. We can't necessarily measure with reliability our students' achievement. The indicators, and we'll go over them in a second, just to remind everybody what they are, they don't really fit. So this year, again, we're going big picture, and we're actually kind of changing a little bit, and we'll talk about this later. We're moving from a look at all these individual indicators. We're not discarding them, but rather than look at them in separate silos, we're instead trying to take a look at the bedrock causes of the achievement gap. There's root causes at work here that we need to fix before we can fix any one of these individual indicators. So first, some demographics, actually almost unchanged from last year this time. You see the breakdown of our student body. This is as of December 1st of 2021 by race and ethnicity on the left, and by what we call lunch status on the right. Again, the same as last year. Lunch status is our attempt to quantify how many of our students come from a low-income household. It's a decent proxy of that goal. It's not perfect, but it's the best we have. So as you can see on that one, about 20% of our students come from low-income households. And all of these demographics work into our thought processes. We celebrate this diversity. This is one of the things that makes Wissahickon as great as it is, and it's one of our treasures. This slide takes a look at our staff composition in terms of race ethnicity. This is, for the most part, unchanged from last year as well, except for the percentage of Black teachers went up about 1 percentage point, from about 5.5% last year to about 6.5% this year. So that's a little bit of progress. We still have work to do. And then on the far right column, you can see how they measure up against the same percentages from the previous slide of our student population. And then this is the last I'll discuss before I pass it along, but this is just the timeline. We started this back in August of 2016. We launched this. We took each year, we sort of we took a look at what we had in front of us in terms of data. We tried some things, we developed some plans, and then we adapted each year. And again, the pandemic throws a wrench into things. One of the highlights from over the past 5 years is we've moved from measuring absolute achievement to an attempt to also measure growth of students, which I think is really, really good. Again, we're going to have a hard time with that tonight because of the pandemic's data issue. Tonight's annual report number 5, and then ongoing, we have all this work to develop and improve our understanding of the why. So that's really important. That's going to be a flavor for tonight, really. It's not so much that we have a gap. We are the first ones to admit we do. We're trying to figure out why that is. And again, it's morphing from individual causes to a broader structural systemic cause. And then we're going to continue to work to close the gap. So at this point, I'm passing it over to Dr. Jen Schmidt, who will talk a little bit about those achievement indicators that we normally use, why we picked them, and why we can't necessarily use them this year, but we're not forgetting about them.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Crisfield. As Dr. Crisfield mentioned, a series of indicators were identified as a way to measure our progress towards our work to close the achievement gap. The measures that are tracked in a typical year or normal school year include 10 progress indicators that span across the elementary, the middle school, and the high school levels. And as you can see, those indicators consist of various national and state achievement measures such as PSSA and PSAT, as well as local grade-based achievement measures such as math fact fluency and honor roll. Yet we know that last year wasn't a normal school year, and we know that these achievement indicators and some of our growth indicators as well will not be reliable measures of progress towards closing the gap because of factors related to the pandemic. However, we are continuing to look at different pieces of data to monitor. And so, for example, one progress measure related to the 12th grade AP indicator that the district is currently monitoring and exploring further as part of our ongoing work towards equity is disproportionality in AP enrollment. And this is an example of one of the topics that was discussed at the most recent Equity Oversight Committee meeting in January. The education landscape has shifted due to COVID-19, and that has definitely changed everything. And although our focus returned to academics and addressing curriculum gaps last year, we were still navigating the pandemic, and our students were learning in a variety of settings, including in-person, virtual, and a combination of hybrid environments. And we also had students who were homeschooled. But we had work to be done, and we had learning challenges that we needed to overcome. We know all of these factors influence achievement and they influence the gap. However, as the landscape has shifted, we have to shift in order to best meet the needs of all of our learners. And so this means that we are not only focusing on the efforts of addressing students' academic progress, but also, and more importantly, we're focusing on social emotional needs and creating a climate of belonging. And now I'll turn the presentation over to Dr. DeAnne.
Thank you, Dr. Schmidt and Dr. Crisfield. So when we look at the big picture, what we're really talking about is the system. And we have to keep some things in mind. That is that the achievement gap that we're seeing today has developed over decades. It didn't happen overnight, and we cannot change it overnight. It's something that will take many, many years, many, many efforts in many different ways to address and close the gap. School systems often ask for prescriptive strategies that are going to help to close the achievement gap. And what we need to know is that the research is clear that the focus needs to shift to the pedagogical approaches to focus on increasing the educational environment to ensure that it is culturally relevant. And so as we think about moving forward and we think about what we've done, we need to keep that in mind. Keeping in mind that it is the big picture, it's the system. There are many different layers and therefore many different avenues that we need to address when we're addressing the problem. It's going to require a systemic solution because it is a systemic problem. And so in 2021, we sort of looked at that as triaging, and there were many efforts put in place to attempt to support, to attempt to close the gap, to work diligently toward addressing COVID-related needs, of course, keeping in mind the gap all along the way. And so some efforts are listed here. And so we, of course, have a question. Do we have evidence that these strategies have helped to close the gap? And the answer is no. There's really no magic solution or strategy. Again, it goes back to changing the system. And so the efforts that we have in place have to consider all of that. So as we move forward, we're focusing on strategic action steps to identify and dismantle root causes of inequities in our system. We're thinking about belonging. This is from a text, Belonging Through Culture of Dignity by Floyd Cobb and John Cronapple. And it shows this idea of what we are frequently in education considering is the hierarchy of needs. And so you can see here what they've done is shown where belonging fits in terms of the hierarchy of needs. Belonging, when we think about belonging, we're talking about the extent to which people feel personally appreciated, validated, accepted, and treated fairly within an environment. Research shows that we know the more students feel a sense of belonging, the more motivated they are, the more engaged they are, the more resilient they are and the more successful they are if they feel that sense of belonging in school. And so this research has shaped what many districts are understanding now about the gap, that we need to think about, yes, academic achievement, absolutely, but we see where that falls in terms of the steps to success here. That at the foundation, before achievement, we have to focus on and think about the sense of belonging. So right now, we don't have quantitative data to speak to this. However, we have plenty of qualitative data. We have the words of our students. We have the experiences our students have shared with us in terms of illustrating a lack of belonging and bringing to our awareness. And we do have a belonging survey, a climate survey that we're going to administer to students and staff. And more information is forthcoming to families about that. But once we do that, we'll gain some quantitative data, and that'll help us track and monitor over the years. And it will help to shape what we know we need to do, or rather help us to know better what we need to do in terms of that sense of belonging for our students. And so this illustration shows that there may come, obviously, if we're not addressing the sense of belonging, there becomes a gap, a perilous gap, right? The belonging gap. When people are uncertain about their belonging, they search for cues to help them to know how to fit in, where to fit in, if they're liked, if they're valued, and if they're accepted. And those cues, especially having to think about that, having to use that cognitive energy, affects their ability to focus on academics. And there's research to show that students who are members of underrepresented groups, who are often stereotyped and experience stereotyped experiences, they are especially likely to be anxious about not belonging. And of course, that affects their ability to focus. There's research to show that changes to practices can help reduce the belonging anxiety and help to mitigate race-based and gender-based achievement gaps. This research also shows us what some things that can affect academic achievement. All of these things can potentially come from that lack of belonging. And all of these things most certainly affect academic achievement. And this is why we must focus on ensuring that sense of belonging, in addition to all of the tremendous academic supports and interventions that are in place and that will continue to be in place for our students. That educational belonging structures, what are we looking at? We're looking at people. Do people help me feel like I belong? We're looking at policies and procedures, looking at rules and expectations in our schools and in our district. We're looking at practices and curriculum and materials and instruction to make sure that all of these ways that we can ensure our students feel that sense of belonging, that we're addressing interpersonal, institutional, and instructional belonging in our schools. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Latour, and she'll talk about our commitment to educational equity, and she'll walk through some of the steps the district has taken.
Thank you, Dr. DeAnne. We have three major committees dedicated to educational equity: the Board Racial Equity Oversight Committee, the District Equity Planning Committee, and the School Equity Committees. This structure that is in place really helps us to investigate our policies, procedures, practices to ensure equity and cultural responsiveness. There are district critical areas of appraisal that we highlight here. These areas of appraisal provide us with an intentional focus to help us with our equity efforts and our action steps. With our district action steps that are noted here, you can see several areas that we're exploring. One area, such as the Code of Conduct Microstudy, is one that we conducted during the fall semester, and we explored both qualitative and quantitative data. The evaluated collected data will provide recommendations for us to consider as we review our district's Code of Conduct. Our intentional efforts with professional learning focuses on building our staff's capacity and confidence and being culturally responsive practitioners with a social emotional lens as well. And again, that enhances that feeling and that sense of belonging. Additionally, our leadership team has participated in professional learning sessions dedicated to restorative practices, combined with a culturally responsive approach, which will extend to a secondary cohort of teachers. At this time, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Crisfield.
Thank you. These are term closing thoughts. And first thought I have is I'm sure it's evident to everybody that I did not personally put this slide deck together. There are way too many awesome graphics and flow to it. And for that, I'd like to thank the A team that I have working with me. This was a collaborative effort this year, and it's going to be that way moving forward. In a nutshell, we are learning. We are learning things about how to get better. We are, for example, moving from that initial focus on individual indicators to instead a much more robust and probably impactful look at the system. And in this case, the theme of tonight, belongingness. This work really matters to us. It has for 5 years, and the fact that we're getting better at it and we're not leaving it, and we're going to continue to work on it, I hope is indication that we're very serious about it. We want this gap closed. And our goals are to do those things up on the screen, go beyond diversity and get to inclusion, get to dignity, get to that belonging, that feeling of belongingness. All of that, if we can do all of that, it gets us to opportunities. And then if we close the achievement gap, which may well be better framed the opportunity gap, then we get to where we want to be. And it's not going to happen overnight. As Dr. DeAnne pointed out, it was caused by many, many years of issues. We're learning about them, we're learning how to fix them, and we remain committed to doing it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Crisfield, Dr. Schmidt, Mrs. Latour, and Dr. DeAnne for that presentation. I guess I'll start it off. I have a couple questions myself, and then I'll go around and see if my fellow board members have questions. Dr. DeAnne, the belonging survey you referenced, can you give us some idea of what types of questions will be posed to our students and families?
Yes, thank you. Actually, because we have Ms. Latour here, I know that she would be happy to answer that question. We'll be composing a message to families to help them to understand when we're doing the survey for students, why we're doing the survey, and that will include a sampling of a few questions for you. So Ms. Latour, do you want to share?
Thank you, Dr. DeAnne. So in terms of the survey that we're using, we had the opportunity to review several survey tools, and we focused on the psychological school sense membership scale, basically to assess, of course, the degree to which staff and students perceive a sense of belonging. So some of the questions that staff and students will look at or experience will be, I feel accepted in the classroom or spaces that I'm in. I feel that the teachers acknowledge who I am and accept me as I am. Those types of questions will be those that students will explore. Currently, for the communication to parents and guardians, I have several samples, 5 in all, that really provide a good sense of what types of questions will be asked of students. So it's really trying to gauge their level of how they're perceived by their staff, their teachers, how they're perceived by their peers, how they are perceiving themselves in terms of involvement in some of the club activities that persist and exist in our school community. So we just want to make sure that we're looking at how they're pretty much seeing themselves in that whole scope of the school community. And so those questions will really tailor and be tailored to those types of questions.
Great, thank you so much. And then my next question was, I saw that we had listed up there as one of the things we did, an academic response coordinator, a coach, and it looked like we had a number of different community partnerships perhaps that we've been working with. Do we have anything in place with student to student? Like I picture an elementary school at Stony Creek, we have a 5th grade buddy for kindergartners. Do we have anything comparable in middle school or high school, where you have an older upperclassman that kind of guides you and perhaps checks in with you and tries to get you to engage in clubs that they belong to, anything like that?
Thank you. Ms. Latour, would you mind sharing? I know that there was just today the start of the Mentorship Program, so this is perfectly timed.
Yes, thank you so much. So we have a secondary mentorship program that we've started with the collaborating with, of course, the Guide Right leadership team. And in this partnership for this year, at this time, we're looking at really building the capacity of the students who are involved in it. So we're focusing our efforts on the mentees, making sure that we provide them with that leadership capacity, and then also provide them with the skills that they need to serve as those peer mentors. So that secondary mentorship program that's currently structuring itself now and building its foundation as of today will be that network that will allow for peer mentoring to take place at both the middle school and high school levels.
And will we be identifying the students that need mentorship, or is this something that's voluntary? Like, I would like to sign up and have somebody be my mentor. How would that work exactly?
Yeah, so we'll make sure it's going to continue to be something that allows for a student to nominate a teacher, a parent, or guardian. So there'll be many avenues for nomination into the mentorship program, so that we can ensure that we are wrapping all students and they feel that sense of belonging and they have that student to kind of guide them through that level of success that they need at that high school or middle school level.
Great, thanks. And then my next question had to do with metrics, like with the other measures that we're using for different grade levels, like the different tests we were using to rely on, like how are we going to measure success with this new approach? Yes.
Thank you for your question. So in terms of measuring and tracking that sense of belonging, the belonging survey tool is one that we are starting with this year, and that'll be our baseline, but we intend to continue to administer that throughout the years to come. So we'll be monitoring the sense of belonging in our district over the next several years, and we hope to see growth in terms of that data that we're collecting using that tool.
Okay, great, thank you. And then as far as the teacher numbers, jumping to a different topic, the disparity between the percentage of students of a particular group versus the number of teachers, it looks like in certain areas like Asian teachers, we're really lacking. It was like, I think like a 15% or 14% spread, same with Hispanic. It looks like we're getting a little bit more of a narrow gap with African American, but what are we doing as far as like our Asian teachers or Hispanic to attract more teachers in those groups?
Absolutely. Actually, Ms. Latour and I are actually working together to sort of target some of those areas. Certainly, broadening our areas and where we're recruiting is certainly important. And then our affiliations with different colleges and working with different colleges. So those are some of the things that we're working on. But yes, it's definitely something we've noticed as well.
Okay, and I guess we go to all of the like diversity fairs, we attend these, correct?
Yep, multiple, through the year.
Okay, great. And then my last question had to do with like takeaways from COVID. Like we've all seen what's referred to as like the COVID slide. Is there anything we're seeing that's happened during COVID and something we've done that we feel could be a takeaway that we could then apply towards the achievement gap overall? Like we've been hiring additional reading specialists. We've hired the kindergarten aides to help with socialization. Is there anything that we've noticed that we could maybe use down the road?
I'll give you one anecdotal because I think there's a number, but one that sticks out of my mind is last year when we had so many students at home, we came to realize there was a communication gap between households who spoke primarily Spanish or only Spanish and the school district. So in that instance, we actually hired somebody who's fluent in Spanish and an educator to just be that liaison for these families. And it was marvelous last year. All of a sudden, we were getting information. They were getting information. And all of a sudden, the students would log on again and they became re-engaged. So small thing, but what we learned from that is, well, we don't have students at home now. Everybody's back in school. The communication with homes in that other language, in this case Spanish, is mission critical for the success of the students. So we will continue to have somebody, if it's not the same person on an hourly basis, it will be the schools will have the ability to communicate in Spanish or whichever other language. And especially when a student starts falling off in terms of his or her either school performance or something else, right away in the language that's understood at the house, so that we can get that communication channel open.
That's great. Yeah, and hopefully we can look at other things that we've utilized during COVID.
Absolutely.
Moving forward as well. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'll open it up now to my fellow board members. Anyone else have questions?
I have a question.
Dan?
Have other districts used belonging surveys
and then have used that data to help them show improvement in their achievement gap?
There
Yes,
are,
oh.
Ms. Latour, please.
Yes, there are several districts that have employed the Belonging Climate Tool. Some of them have used the University of Pennsylvania to administer it and to collect that data. But within our area, you have local school districts that have done so. For example, Abington School District and several others that have worked in a collaborative venue have done the Belonging Climate Tool this year, actually in the fall semester.
Any other questions?
Have we implemented the universal, I think there was talk of implementing universal gifted testing in first grade. Have we implemented that this year?
Yes, that is on the schedule to start this spring. Yes.
Sorry, I have one more. This is a little out there, but have we thought about introducing some Spanish language into the elementary schools to give kids a better sense of, you know, a different culture that their classmates share? And for just all around building like language skills that are important when you're that young?
Wade, do you want to take this one? No? Okay. The answer is we would love to be able to do that. And I don't know to what extent we've thought about it. We don't feel like we can do that in an authentic way enough to make a difference. And we're just up against that constant struggle of time, competing really awesome needs such as that with all these other awesome needs.
I have two questions and a suggestion.
Go ahead, Paul.
Sure. Two questions. The one is, I'm assuming with the survey, we will also collect demographic data so that we can track any trends that might take place within specific demographics. Is that true?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question is, the mentorship program, I believe, will be fantastic. I'm very excited to hear about that. Will there be a plan to roll that out also to elementary?
So there will be conversations about an elementary mentorship program, absolutely. Whether it's going to be affiliated or connected with the Guidewright program is another question, but definitely we're looking at that ongoing mentorship being something that is available K through 12.
Okay, thank you. Last point is just a suggestion regarding the question of learning a second language in the elementary schools. Understanding some of the challenges that exist. One recommendation that came out previously was possibly as part of an after-school program that a second language might be introduced. So I know at the elementary level and after school, there's programs such as chess and aerobics and things like that to keep the kids involved. We might want to think about the possibility of a second language that could be after school. So it would address the issue of the resources within the school and the time needed within the school day.
I think that has potential because then it would get us that goal that we all want, and then also buy us some more time. So yes, we can look into that.
Great, thank you.
Steffi, some questions?
Yeah, just a couple. Sure. So for the belonging survey, will we see results of that survey sometime in the coming weeks, months, or how are we going to get that output?
Yes, thank you for your question. We are looking to administer in February, and so we would hope to be able to have time to analyze and pull it together in a way that's presentable in March, April timeframe.
Beautiful. And I didn't quite catch, was that going to be for all grade levels? So K through 12, is that the goal?
That is correct. K through 12, all of our students and all of our staff.
Will we also take a pulse from parents and guardians?
Yes, we had lots of good discussion about this, and we do intend to administer a survey for parents and caregivers. We did want to focus our attention first on students and staff, but parents and caregivers survey will be the next step in that process.
Awesome, great. And my kind of dovetail thought to that, and maybe a suggestion is, you know, and I appreciate the presentation and I agree, we're looking to help identify opportunities for everyone. But how do we kind of see the accomplishments that we have within the year, like waiting a whole year to see what has happened or what has changed feels a little bit too far apart for something that's so tremendous and so kind of important for our community. So can we have maybe a more regular check-in, even if it's like small but meaningful successes that you're having, like, you know, more diversity kind of outreaches, or I don't know, whatever, but just so that we can keep a pulse on all the efforts that are being done here. That's all, but thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No?
Well, I'm sorry, just to jump off Zephy's question really quickly. You talked about using like social emotional indicators, I believe. How are we tracking those indicators? Are they quantifiable, or how does that, who mentioned that? I'm sorry. Like the social and emotional tracking of the student versus, oh, is that what you were, sorry, okay. So specifically using the belonging tool to reference those to track that data. Okay, yeah. Thank you.
So, did you have some questions?
Just a comment to Jim and Yewe and the entire team. I appreciated the presentation tonight, and it's nice to see, or interesting to see as well, how our thinking around this challenge of the achievement gap has evolved over the last 5 years or so. It sort of started at looking at standardized test scores and differential average achievement levels between one group of students versus another, and trying to attack that directly was always hard. But this idea and the approach and some of the ideas and thoughts tonight that are talking about not just focused on test scores, but really thinking more holistically about the student experience and the environment that our students learn and operate in, and trying to focus on some of the underlying root causes that could unlock or facilitate greater performance from all of our students, especially the ones that aren't doing so good relative to some of their peers. So thanks for all the time and energy you guys have put in, and I'm excited to see the evolution in our thinking, and excited in being involved and hearing more about the changes that we're going to be making over time. I think an important thing is that we don't focus just on doing a bunch of things, but that we also measure our impact over time. Like, is it having the intended effect on belonging or on some other indicator that we hope to have, and just consistently following it through time. And then based on that, making course corrections, adjustments, if necessary, to fine tune and improve along the way. This is something, like as was mentioned in the presentation, is going to be a long-standing effort, but I think with consistency and focus, we can make a significant impact in improving the achievement gap for the district and for all of our students over time. So thanks again for the efforts.
Thanks, Joe. Anyone else? Zephy, go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot one question. For the screening that you mentioned before for the gifted program, are we screening just a cohort and like of grades, specific grades, or are we kind of doing a full blow kind of screening?
The screener will be administered to all first graders in the district, and every year it'll be administered to all first graders in the district.
So if you're second grade or older, you've missed your window.
If you're a second grade or older, you've missed this screener that we're newly implementing starting this school year. However, there are other ways for students to gain access to being screened and being evaluated for gifted education. And those methods have always been in place. And we have been working with our school psychologists, with our counselors, with our teachers. I know our Department of Student Supports has been working to ensure that the message is getting out in terms of looking through the lens of cultural responsiveness as it relates to identifying gifted characteristics. So there are other elements to our efforts that we hope will capture some students who maybe have not been, won't be in first grade to be a part of this newly implemented approach in terms of the annual first grade screener.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? No? Well, again, thank you so much for that presentation. All right, so we will now move on to our first public comment, which is on agenda items only. We allow 5 speakers max to be heard on the same topic, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And it's the board's practice not to engage in dialogue with speakers. When appropriate, we will post follow-up responses on our district website. When you come to the podium, please state your name, where you live, and the topic you'll be speaking on. And please make sure to keep your mask on when giving comments. All right, our first one is Colleen Comprola. I'm sorry if I said that wrong.
Colleen Semprola. So I have some questions regarding the achievement gap in the presentation that I would like answered on the website. And regarding the presentation, are we continuing to look at any other causes besides belonging? How was the conclusion reached that the focus regarding the performance gap should be on belonging? Do we have information on minority students being less involved in sports, clubs, school activities, etc.? I think that's information we probably have at fingertips. And are we looking at minority groups that have higher academic achievement and scholastic performance and looking at what the differences are there and some of the causes for that? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colleen. Katie, we'll now look to see if we have anybody online.
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, then we'll move to our next in-person speaker, which is Carmina Taylor. Carmina, you can come on up.
So I am DeAnne, if you could take some notes, because I really want to give some context. On September 12, 2016, that is when the superintendent presented his attack plan. It is now 5 years later, almost 6 years later, and this is about the 3rd iteration of the attack plan. The problem here is that when you talk about an experience gap or belonging, number one, the best source of information are the people that have experienced Wissahickon and experienced being a parent. And I clearly remember Black parents and Black community leaders for years, for decades, explaining their experiences and the belonging issue. So as I sat here and I watched the report again, I think it's problematic after 5 years that you don't have quantitative data, because when I sat on Zoom last year and I heard the 4th annual report, we talked about the COVID slides and the disengaged students. There were hard GPAs that were failing. Those are quantitative numbers and data you can extract. I personally, I professionally consult, and I have 8 school districts right now that are doing the PSSM survey. You do not correlate academic achievement with the belonging survey because they're all anecdotal. And because it's a voluntary process, most students we have found in the 3 months that I have hands-on with Penn, the cohort working with it, are not responding truthfully. So I think that the community deserves more substantive outcomes based on this. I am a minority. I was a student. I was a parent. I was a parent leader. I had a Black son. He had Black friends, Black male friends. I helped special ed families. You need to talk to them. You correlate the data, regardless of whether or not there was individual numbers and stuff done before, you can still take that data with what you're doing. This is not good enough. I have so much more to say, but I know there's other people that can help this district with your problem. It's just not a simple answer of belonging. It's more complicated. So to clarify, when you have systemic issues in education, that's institutional systemic racism. It has occurred in this district for over 50 years. There's been two 10-year decades where there was no hiring of any minority teachers. That's not putting the blame on anybody, it's fact. Talk to the people that know what the history and the context evolved. I also wanted to say that his A game is because he's added women of color on his team.
Thank you for your comments, Carmina. Katie, is there anyone else online?
There are no more hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, well then we'll move on. So we'll go now to the board president report. And this week I have no informational items and no action items. We'll move next to our superintendent report. Jim?
Thank you. Just one informational item. That is that last week we had the first of what will be many community conversations on the topic of school start times. The next step in this process is to have a similar conversation with our staff, which is actually going to happen day after tomorrow. They were invited to the first one, but this will be staff specific. It'll be after school. And then right immediately after that, we will take the necessary steps to form the steering committee, which we discussed last week. Will be a group of students and staff and community members to help kind of sort through the mountains of information on this topic, help assess the hurdles that are specific to Wissahickon. Yes, there are many examples of this, districts that have either done it or thought about it, but each district's different. So we're going to need a lot of help with that. And eventually, and this is a key reminder here too, is that nothing is happening. If anything happens at all, nothing will happen until the 2023-2024 school year. So a long process, many conversations. But the good news is we started that conversation on Wednesday, and many of you were joining, there with us. Thank you. Many other opportunities, and we look forward to those.
Jim, I received a question from a parent. How can parents get involved on, I believe we're forming like a parent task force.
Steering committee?
Steering committee, yes. How can parents get involved in that?
The answer is we'll most likely tomorrow night, we'll send out a notice to all families with information about how to do that. It's going to be like a button on the website. You tell us who you are, what your affiliation is. We'll look to have a spread of student, staff, community members, and they can express their interest that way.
Great, thanks, Jim. Does anyone else have any questions? No? All right. It looks like you have no action items, right? Okay, so we'll move on then to the assistant superintendent report. Dr. DeAnne?
Thank you. No action items. One informational item, which is the Black History Month preview. Our schools are planning a variety of activities to recognize and honor Black History Month. Principals will share their updates with me throughout February, and at our February work session board meeting on February 28th, I'll present updates of our students engaging in learning opportunities to recognize and honor Black History Month. So I'm excited to be sharing that with the board and with the community on February 28th. That concludes my report for this evening.
Great. Thanks so much, Dr. DeAnne. I look forward to hearing that report on the 28th. All right, then we'll move on to the board solicitor report. Jeff?
I have no informational items, nor do I have any action items. So that concludes my report.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, then we'll move on to the board secretary report. Wade?
Thank you. At the next meeting, we will request approval of 3 sets of minutes, the communication, regular public board meeting, and the communication committee again. And there is no informational item.
Great, thanks, Wade. And do you want to go ahead and give the treasurer report right away?
Thank you very much. There's no informational item, and at the next meeting, we will request approval for the treasurer report for December 31st. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then moving on to the Director of Human Resources report, Danielle.
Great, good evening. Tonight, there are no informational items. For your review are 6 action items under 12B. The first 2 action items include retirements, resignations, appointments, changes of status, leaves of absences, extracurricular changes, and volunteer additions. Action item 3 is seeking approval for an increase to the custodian subrate. Item 4 is for the approval of new extracurricular job descriptions. Item 5 is a request for conference attendance. And the final item is the approval of the amendment to the employment agreement of Wade Coleman, Business Administrator. And that concludes my report.
Great, thank you, Danielle. Does anybody have any questions? All right, well, great, thank you. Then we'll go ahead to our committee reports. Communications Committee, Debbie?
Hi, yeah, thank you. We did have a meeting that Wade actually outlined in his temp B3. We did have a workshop where we looked through our website and as well as other websites to determine how we would like to move forward. Kristen Rollins is on lead for that. And she's doing a lot of work along with the team to kind of get us into a great place. We're looking to update not only the website, but perhaps even changing partners and becoming more, technologically savvy with our resources. A couple of things that came up out of that meeting was we will kind of have Kristen make updates to the website in the interim if we find things. And one thing we did talk about that pertains to all of us here is that we will be updating our bios as well as our pictures for the school board. So I'm sure you've gotten an email from Kristen. We have like a little template that we can follow so that we can update our bios. If you want a new picture, she can help coordinate that as well. So this is a 2-year program or process. So it's a pretty big undertaking. So I will be providing updates on a pretty regular basis through this forum as Kristen kind of gets through the different stages. As with all the other things that we do here, we will be taking in feedback from all the various stakeholders, and Kristen will be pulling that through along with the team. So great, great update. Oh, Katie already has me queued up on our new numbers. Before I go to that, do you have any questions about the website? Sorry, I jumped right into the website. Any questions? Okay. So these are our new numbers. This is on campus, in person, reported cases. This was week through January 28th. And you can see we had a really nice drop from 75 the week before to 25 the week before this week. So I'm happy. This is just one data point of this trend, but I hope it continues. The next slide is our off campus. So anybody who's reported positive that was not on campus, again, through January 28th, and we see a similar trend in this where we went from 16 to 8. And then when we're looking at our quarantining isolation for our orange is where we're looking at. So our total number in quarantine isolation, this is a snapshot of January 28th. We're at 45. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but a couple of weeks ago, we were like almost at 100 or maybe right at 100. So again, this is definitely a positive trend here as well. So happy that we are seeing this. And then the next slide is for our staff member who are quarantining. Similar story. This is also on a downward trend. We have right now 10 staff members quarantining or in isolation. The next slide is this this newer slide that Katie created for us so that we could keep a track on our transmission status. And you can see it's dated from 12/2 through 1/20. And, you know, here we're still showing our transmission levels at high. As a reminder, and Katie, keep me honest, or Jim, we need to be 2 weeks in a row in moderate or better before we can go to mask optional.
That is correct. Two weeks in a different level for the masking status changes. It will be masking highly recommended instead of masking mandatory. Yes.
So as you can see here, even though our numbers are getting better, we're still at a high transmission rate, and we must remember that that's still keeping our masks on at this point. Any questions? I think the rest of the slides are just our terminology, which I think by now we all might know them better now.
Steffi, is the incidence rate, is that in the school district or is it countywide?
That would be the district's 3 municipalities.
Zephy, I mean, it's great to see the dramatic drop off in terms of cases, which is fantastic. And hopefully that's a trend that continues, those low case counts. My recollection was that I think at the beginning of January, we were looking at the total number of students quarantined was like close to 300, actually. I think 278, 280 something, or in early January. So the fact that it's all the way down where it is now is a dramatic improvement, which is great.
Joe, thanks for remembering that. I think I blocked that out of my memory because I think I did get scared at one point, but you're probably recollecting that better than I am. All I know is a couple of weeks ago, we were still like pretty high. And I was like, when is this going to change? So, I mean, it's one trend, right? So we can't get too excited, but I feel like I can exhale a little bit with my mask on though.
I've had a lot of parents ask when the notification letters might come back to their for their classrooms, and I think many people just want the same sort of notification that one would get if someone in the class had strep or lice, just like a general health notification. And some people are still using that to say, hey, you know what, we might not visit grandma this weekend because there might have been exposure at school. So is that on the table?
It is. The pause was just because of the overwhelming nature of the nurses' responsibilities. But I'll ask when there might be a sense of it could get back to that. It's more labor intensive than it might appear on the surface, but I'll certainly ask.
Any other questions or comments for Zephy? No? All right, then we'll go ahead and thank you so much, Zephy. And we'll go ahead and move on to our Curriculum and Technology Committee report. Ronnie?
Okay, I have no informational items. Dr. DeAnne has a lot of action items that you'd like to go through.
Thank you. There are 2 action items for which we'll seek approval next Monday. Item 14B1 is ratification of outplaced students and tuition costs for 2 students that are outlined in document 14-1. And item 14B2 will be seeking approval of a payment for the MCIU's Age of Beginner program for the current school year. This payment is for students who have become school age, but their parents decided to keep them in the early intervention program for in another school year. So those are our 2 action items that we'll seek approval at next Monday's meeting. And that concludes our report for this evening.
Thank you, Ronnie and Dr. DeAnne. Zephy, you have a question?
Yeah, can you describe this Age of Beginner program a little bit more? I'm not sure I completely understand it.
Absolutely. So in special education services, students who are eligible for early intervention services, that's before they become school age, so before kindergarten age. When students become school age, students have the option, just as any family does, when their student becomes 5 years old, they have the option to come into kindergarten. Some families, as we know, may keep their students out of kindergarten for an additional year. For students who are in the early intervention program at the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, students whose families decide to keep them out for an additional year, they remain in the early intervention program for an additional year, and there's an additional cost for that. Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much. I did not quite capture all that. I appreciate it.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? No? All right. Well, thank you so much again, Ronnie and Dr. Tuan. I will move on next to our Facilities and Transportation Committee report. Joe?
Good evening. No informational items this evening, and for voting next week, we have one action item for consideration. It's looks like an abatement contract for the Stony Creek construction project. Wade, do you want to add any color commentary on that item?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. The bids are attached per document 15-1, and it's a mastic that is underneath the floor in the cafetorium and certain panels on the exterior of the building.
Thank you. Any questions or comments regarding the action item? Okay, that's it for Facilities and Transportation.
Great. Thanks so much, Joe and Wade. All right, we'll move on now to our Finance Committee report. David?
Thanks, Amy. We have one informational item for the Finance Committee, and that is that budget workshop dates have been established for February 15th, March 14th, and April 19th. And then if we need a fourth one, it would be May the 9th. The first meeting is, the agenda is to look at the topside budget for the coming year. Consider enrollment projections, reviewing the staffing impacts that we're experiencing, a new program, our item request summary, overall look at revenue and different contributors to that, I believe, 5-year capital projects plan, and then some specific categories in the budget, including capital projects transfer, debt service, and plant operations and maintenance, and then similar agendas for the other two meetings that are scheduled. Those meetings are at 6:30. Wade, have we established, are these in-person meetings or Zoom or hybrid?
We actually haven't established that because I hadn't thought of it, but I would think it's in person, and we'll talk about it and decide.
Okay, great. Is there any more you want to say about the agenda? And then we have 4 action items to consider next week, which are the following. First, we would seek approval of financial reports per document 16-1. Asking for approval of the appointments of Natalie Cormier as the deputy tax collector for Ambler Borough, Jennifer Stonsky as the deputy tax collector for Whitpain Township, and Melissa Wanchik as the deputy tax collector for Lower Gwinnett Township.
I think those
Those are all wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Jen and Ambler, Natalie and Lower Gwinnett, and Melissa and Whitpain.
Wade, would you explain this, please?
Sure. So this is the appointment of the deputies, and I think it probably is right, but we'll check it.
Oh, they deputy each other?
Yep.
Oh.
And again, I just want to throw an accent out there. We are very excited in the business office because the tax collectors are working so well, and they're being each other's deputies, which means that they're helping each other, and they'll help each other if they run into problems. And we're very excited about it.
I understand that Lower Gwinnett has already approved their proposed deputy tax collector. So hopefully the other borough and township will follow suit there if they haven't. The third item we're considering would be the approval of the list of payments issued for the month ending December 31st per document 16-2. And then finally, approval of parameters resolutions, which I will let Wade explain in as much detail as you like for potential bond issues.
Sure, thank you very much. So the parameters resolution is a vehicle whereby the board approves the resolution, and then the financial advisor sets a date, and then we have a auction sale where certain entities, financial institutions would be invited. They go through an auction, and then a financial advisor, PFM, reviews the lowest overall bids. The auction is declared over, and then primarily Amy and myself would then sign off on those documents, assuming that we believe it's in the best interest of the district. So the parameters resolution essentially says, these are the rules of the game, and whatever day that we play by them, if it is a positive auction, then we would accept those bids. If for whatever reason we're not happy with the bids, then we would not take the auction sale, and we wouldn't approve it. Amy, whether you knew it or not, or Mrs. Ginsburg, there's lots and lots of documents that we have to sign between now and then and after the sale as well. So that would essentially, the first one is for new money, and that primarily pays off the remaining pieces of Stony Creek. And then depending on how much of the contingency we use, we may have available funds to carry over into either the future projects of the middle school pool renovation, becoming classrooms, or the turf project at the high school. So the good news is we very, very likely are going to have excess funds to use on those projects. Either way, the auction sale should be underneath $10 million to be bank qualified, which would give us lower interest rates, and then also likely have a 5-year call for the future, so that if interest rates drop in the future, we would be able to essentially refund those in a future time frame if it's advantageous to the district. So that's what the parameters does, and you can read through it, and bond counsel has been through it as well. And if you have any questions, you can certainly send them to me, and I'll get them answered prior to the Friday meeting. The other two parameters resolutions, as discussed at the finance meeting, we have 2 outstanding bond issues from 2016 and 17 related to the natatorium at the high school, the central plant at the high school, and various improvements to the site. There's a refunding opportunity in the current market whereby we could potentially save about $900,000. You never know. They could have another Fed meeting, and that savings could be down to $500,000. But right now, that's what's out there. And, you know, it also could be positive, and maybe it's even more than that. So again, the parameters resolutions set the parameters for the sale. We enact that sale, and then if those are positive results, then we would approve those and bring the savings back to the district for each individual sale. So one could happen and the other couldn't, or they could both happen, or neither could happen. It's all individual.
Thanks very much, Wade. That's all from the Finance Committee.
Thank you so much, David and Wade. Does anyone have any questions or comments? No? All right. Well, I would just encourage anyone that's interested in learning more about our budget to attend those budget workshops that David and Wade host over several meetings. They're really informative, and you really get to understand more about the school's budget. So I encourage anyone that's interested in the public to attend those. Next, we'll have our policy committee report. And since Marshall's on here, Jim said he would take that report.
Certainly, I'm happy to. Before I get to that, I would just like to say with regard to the parameters resolution, we did ask the question. So thank you, Mr. Coleman, for that. Policy committee, the policies on the agenda are to be voted upon next meeting. They're all the second reading of the same exact set of policies that were passed as first reading at our previous meeting. Since that first reading, none have been changed. So once these are moved off the docket next meeting, we'll have another policy committee meeting. We'll have another set of these, and we'll continue marching down the path of getting our manual updated.
Great. Thanks so much, Jim. Any questions or comments? No? All right. Well, then we'll go ahead and move on to our Racial Equity Oversight Committee report. Paul?
We have one informational item this evening, which is a recap of our January 24th meeting. And I'm going to pass it to Joe Antonio to deliver that recap.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I'll do the recap this evening if Paul wasn't able to attend the most recent one. At the Racial Equity Oversight Committee meeting, the primary focus of that session was taking a look at representation of Black and Brown students in particular in our AP classes at Wissahickon. Well, first off, before I talk about the specifics of the presentation, taking a step back, like why are we looking at AP and why do we care about AP? First off, AP classes, or having taken at least one AP class, we know makes you as a student a stronger applicant for colleges. The more AP classes you have, the more rigorous course load you've taken, the more selective the colleges that you can apply to. Also, research has shown that having taken at least one AP course in high school is correlated with higher rates of persisting in college. That means continuing on until you actually graduate. And it's also correlated with higher GPAs while you're in college as well. Those positive effects are also greater for Black and Brown students, for low-income students, and for first-generation college students. So there are positives for and benefits of taking AP courses. And we have essentially unlimited seats of AP classes in our district. Anyone who wants to take AP courses, we will make space for them and have class for them. So then when we take a look at the actual composition of who takes advantage of all the great AP courses that we have in Wissahickon, what we see, and probably not surprising, is that we have wide disparities in the types of students that enroll in AP classes. You have a severe underrepresentation of Black and Brown students in AP courses. And anecdotally, we talked about that even when there are Black and Brown students in AP courses, they tend to be in less of the hard science or math AP courses and more things like AP Psych or AP Gov. And what we wanted to discuss and explore was what are some of the factors that may be resulting in those outcomes in our district. And so we talked about the academic tracking that happens as early as middle school for students about which level of math you get, like in 7th grade. And then that has like ripple effects into high school and can close you out from opportunities of taking higher and more advanced math courses or math AP courses, and how that, how that again can create barriers for certain types of students. And we also took a look at teachers and guidance counselors and the role that they play in taking APs. Who are the students that they actually encourage or recommend for APs, and who do they tend not to, right? We talked about from the student side, student awareness of the benefits of AP. They're not necessarily well known. Also, the way our GPAs are calculated, if you got a B in an AP class, that can be actually better than getting an A in an academics class, and the way it works out with GPAs. So the idea that you might take an AP course and not get as good of a grade, it actually could boost your GPA, but people don't necessarily know that, right? They also talked about, and we had some feedback from some of the student reps, current students, as well as recent alums who are part of the Racial Equity Oversight Committee, from their personal experiences. Some of the things they talked about was sometimes you might not have the self-confidence that you can actually handle a class like that. There could be various reasons for that. Sometimes you might feel like an AP class is just not a space for you if you are a student of color. It's just not accepting. You don't feel like you'll be supported. It's maybe related to the belonging issue that we talked about earlier. Also, we talked a little bit about how if you're a student of color, your own peer group can sometimes be a barrier for you wanting to pursue AP or more rigorous coursework. So we talked about all these factors and had a really rich discussion about that. The administration then talked about current efforts and some other additional efforts that they are putting in place or contemplating to try to attack some of those possible dynamics that could be presenting barriers to more of our Black and Brown students being represented in AP courses. So it was really interesting and fascinating discussion, but I think with this topic, as well as others like gifted and all the other things that we've looked at from a racial equity standpoint, what's important is not just to make commitment to doing something about it, but then to, over time, track our progress. Did we do what we said we were going to do? And then did it have the impact that we thought or hoped it would? And if it did, great. If it didn't, what can we do to course correct and change? And we need to really follow this through over time. And then over time, we can see and hopefully experience an actual impact to some of the disparities. But yeah, again, the focus of the last meeting was about AP representation, and yeah, a good discussion as always.
Great, thanks so much, Joe. Do we have any questions or comments? Becky, go ahead.
Joe, thanks for that. Curious if there was any discussion, and I'm sorry I missed the meeting, but was there any discussion about what we can do, like firsthand or kind of immediately, to help solve for this, for the AP examples that you talked about?
Well, I mean, the administration had on their slide deck a series of, a number of actions that they're taking and have taken to try to address and, attack some of the dynamics. So I guess I'll ask Manuel maybe to highlight or expand on some of those things.
Thank you. Yes, as Mr. Antonio said, we did present we did present information from the research to see what does the research say is the best way to eliminate the barriers to increasing Black and Hispanic students in AP courses. And we shared some of the steps that the district has taken and then a few next steps. What was really valuable was to hear feedback from the committee and from the students. Some of those next steps that we have in mind, though, did include looking at how are we systemically capturing students, working closely with the middle school and the high school and thinking about reflecting on what's currently in place. Looking at not just teacher input, but also, as Mr. Antonio said, counselors and principals input, looking for students who might not meet the target for the quantitative data that you might look for being eligible for thinking about AP coursework, but looking at the whole child and tapping students on the shoulder to see if they might be interested, to encourage them. So it's some of those steps we talked about. But what was so valuable was the conversation among the committee and listening to students who were on that committee to help us to gain greater insight and understanding what we need to do to move forward and knowing that, yes, we're on the right track and yes, we have more work to do.
That just reminded me, one of the things I thought was really interesting was that sometimes they have students who have taken AP courses talk to younger students to just provide them more information about what the course is like and the benefits of taking the course. And in the past, I think it tended to be all white and Asian students who are telling students about AP. So it further sort of reinforced the dynamic for a lot of our other students of color that this is not like a class for them, or they don't necessarily see themselves being in that environment. And so there's a more conscious effort to try to make sure that when we're looking at like these student ambassadors for AP courses to the younger students, that we look for other students of color than just like our white and Asian students. And the importance of that representation and people being able to visualize other students who look like them being in those spaces as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Any comments or questions? No? All right, well, thank you again. All right, then we'll move on to our report of board representatives. Marshall is not here to speak to our extracurricular report. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to share regarding extracurriculars? No? Okay. Then I will give my MCIU report. I'm just going to combine my board of directors and legislative committee report because a lot of the legislative material is also presented during our actual board meeting, just more condensed. And this past week we had the legislative 2 weeks ago. This past week we had our board meeting. The board meeting was rather short. It actually was the same evening as our school start time meeting, but they also had a budget workshop that the MCIU was putting on. So they had a very, very short meeting. Dr. Speaker did go over some of the goals that she had set prior in the year. Dr. Speaker is our executive director, for those of you that don't know her. So she went over some of the goals that she had gone over with us earlier in the year, and then went over with us some metrics that she's using to measure those goals and whether or not we're meeting them. So for example, one of the things I brought up before was the partial hospitalization program that was launched. And they're gonna be looking at things like enrollment and attendance data next year to see how that program is working. We also had our audit results. Maylee presented those to us as well, just as we did here a few weeks ago. And as far as legislative items, there was a couple. One of the big things that was discussed at our actual legislative meeting was fair funding and charters. And I know Ron has talked about charters for years, so we've heard a lot about that. But I encourage anyone that wants to read more about it in your own time to go to pacharterchange.org. And there you can learn more about charters and how they're funded and get some more information. And if you didn't get a chance to take that down, I can give it to you after the meeting. We also talked about an update on the school funding lawsuit. And this is a trial that, a lawsuit that's challenging Pennsylvania's school funding system. And the trial in that case began back in November and it's still ongoing. It was filed actually in November of 2014 and has finally gone to trial and is still ongoing. It alleges that Pennsylvania's school funding system violates the education clause and equal protection provisions of the state's constitution by failing to provide an adequate education to school children in low-wealth school districts and creating wide and unjustifiable disparities between school districts. And there's been a lot of compelling testimony presented by various school leaders detailing the inequities that schools do face due to inadequate and equitable funding. And I don't have the case citation here, but if you're interested in knowing more about that lawsuit, I can certainly give you the citation to that case. You can follow it. Apparently, I think some of it is being streamed live online, I had heard. So I can find out more about that as well. We also talked about something that's directly impacting us here, or maybe it's not as much anymore, the school bus driver shortage. And the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has actually waived part of the CDL skills test. And that's the part that requires applicants to identify under the hood engine components. So drivers receiving a CDL under this temporary waiver will only be allowed to drive school buses though. And that waiver will end on March 31st. And they think it's likely to be extended though. Let's see. And that's about it. We talked about a couple other things, but those are really the highlights. So thank you. Any questions, comments? No? All right, well, thank you. Next meeting for MCAU is actually later this month, February 23rd. Actually, later next month, February 23rd. Next, we'll have our North Monaco Technical Career Center, Center representative, Heyman.
Okay, most of the last meeting was personnel matters. And David was gonna, what were you gonna add, David? What did we talk?
There was mostly just routine business. There was the biggest item of the night was approval of a contract to scan a bunch of their archive documents so they can winnow down that massive mountain they have, I guess. But that's it from North Mark.
Great, thank you. Any questions on that? No? Okay. Then we'll move on to our PSBA liaison, Zeffie.
There was no meetings that I was able to attend in January. There's one coming up in 2 weeks.
Great, thanks so much, Zeffie. Then that brings us to our second public comment period. And again, we'll have a maximum of 5 speakers on any particular topic. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. And as mentioned before, it's not our policy to engage in any dialogue with speakers, but if appropriate, we will post a response on the district's website. Coming to the podium, please state your name, address, and municipality of residence, as well as the topic on which you are speaking. And in person, we do have 1 registered speaker, and that is Carmina Taylor. Can you come on up?
Good evening. There was a board meeting where I asked about the restorative practices policy, and I received a response. And I just wanted to say that in 2018, the district had a PowerPoint that said that they were going to put in the district the restorative practices as part of the code of conduct policy. So I looked at the middle school, I looked in the high school, and it does not exist. So I just wanted to point that out because it's very, very misleading that you're trying to address that. It's not in the book, but you brought it up in 2018. And the only reason why I know it's relevant for me is because I was working with a family and there was a young black boy. He was in 7th grade at the time, and from August to November, he had 17 detentions, a black boy. This wasn't one, this was more than one. And I asked the assistant principal, at what point do you try to have the restorative practices policy you committed to in 2018? The man had no answers. So I can't find it. I don't know if it was the October meeting or the December meeting, but I just want to be clear, and I plan to email you the PowerPoint that shows that. So it isn't in the code of conduct at all, and it should be, but the district committed to it in 2018. So I want to point that out. And again, for you, Dr. DeAnne, I think that what's important is to talk to the parents that have had kids that have had these multiple detentions and lunch detentions to see if the code of conduct procedure and policy is working. The other thing is, Joe, I didn't prepare to say this, but I just want to note that in response to your talking about AP, when I became a parent in 2006, the achievement gap disparity started at 3rd grade at Wissahickon. So you can't talk about AP if you're not dealing with where the disparity is in elementary level. I could go on, but then I want to question answered. What parent education initiatives have been conducted in the last 5 years as it relates to opportunities for students with the math tracking, with the math test and AP and honors and in Title I? And when we talk about research, Dr. DeAnne, what does the district research say? When you look at larger studies, we've got a study right here. I think you're not tapping into the resources of the people that can help you. We have a problem here, but we have a wealth of people that can help you. You keep talking about the students, but you don't talk about parents. These are kids that are all under 18. Their parents take care of them. That's it. I'll send my email.
Thank you, Carmina. Katie, is there anyone registered online?
There are no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay, great. Well, then we will move on to board comments. Do any of my fellow board members have any comments this evening?
If I could add one more item to the North Montco report, I forgot. They are going to be holding in-person preview tours a little bit later in the semester, which they haven't been able to do for at least 1 year. So, for prospective students to check out the school and the programs, meet some of the instructors, they'll be having those. I'm sure it's been announced to the students at Wissahickon.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Any other board comments?
Yeah, Amy, I'd like to make a comment. And just for the record, the board's Racial Equity Oversight Committee is composed not just of a few board members, but it's kind of a hybrid. It's different from all of our other board committees. It has current students. It has recent alums. It also has several parents, staff, and some administrators. And there's also a few community members. The vast majority of the members on this, from students to parents to staff, are all people of color. And we have very, I think, candid and active dialogue and discussion. So we have the opportunity to hear directly from, again, students, recent alums, parents of color in our district, so we can benefit from their lived experience and their direct feedback as we take a look at each of these issues. And what I want to mention is that each meeting that we've had so far, we focused on one specific topic related to educational equity in our district, but it is by no means inclusive of what we're trying to do. There are like many pieces and many parts to the challenges of educational equity in Wissahickon. And in an individual meeting, we just tend to focus on one specific one. But again, that doesn't mean that's the only thing we're focused on. Some of the things that Carmina at the podium brought up are all good and valid points. But I want to just assure everyone that we are trying as much as possible to bring in voices of our community members of color into the discussion. And we are looking at all aspects of racial equity challenges in our system as we go about this work.
Thank you, Joe. Anyone else? Alex, do you have any comments this evening?
I don't have any comments at this time.
All right, thank you.
Amy, it's Paul. I just want to acknowledge and say thank you for the lovely and thoughtful gifts that board members received today as a part of the School Board Member Appreciation Month. It was very thoughtful and very much appreciated.
Yes, again, second thank you for that. Thank you so much. Any other comments? No? All right, well then I will go ahead and adjourn this evening's meeting. Oh, do I have to take a vote? Oh, yes. Oh, a motion, yes. Anyone want to make a motion?
So moved.
Everybody looks eager to get out. All right, all those in favor? All right. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you.